let's get started. Welcome to the Yellowdig Fall 2021 kickoff session. And today, Brian and I will give ourselves, we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more in just a moment. But you want to switch to the next slide, Brian? And we can talk about what we're going to do. So yeah, we'll introduce ourselves, and we're going to share some resources so that you can find the answers you need as we're moving on. But basically the idea behind today's session is to provide some ideas for your course, a little bit of refresher for those people who have used Yellowdig in the past, share some updates to the platform. And for those of you who are new, we're going to, certainly accommodate you too, share a little bit about what Yellowdig is. We have some thoughts on how you can best get your community up to speed and get students going, and also maybe some thoughts on what your role is once the community is up and going, and how you can use Yellowdig to sort of inform your teaching as well. And we will certainly be taking questions as well. Brian, anything you want to add to that before we jump in? All right, let's go with introductions. You start, man.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Brian Verdine. I'm Yellowdig's head of client success, and I started at Yellowdig about 3 years ago. My background is all in psychology and education, so I got my PhD from Vanderbilt, did a postdoc at the University of Delaware, and then started dabbling in ed tech while I was there. Ended up working at a startup before this one, and then started at Yellowdig about 3 years ago, doing a lot of the research on the platform, given my background. So a lot of what I know is from looking at the data that's coming out of our platform and from talking to instructors and students in running this sort of support operations as well.
Cool. And I'm Bob Erdischek. I'm Yellowdig's Senior Academic Solutions Architect, and I've been with Yellowdig for a little over a year and a half now, and really enjoying it here. I come from a higher education background. A little before the turn of the century, I transitioned from a law career into some teaching, and a little after the turn of the century, I started working as an instructional technologist, faculty developer, checking out ed tech and seeing if it was appropriate for courses, and also helping instructors move their courses online, whether it was distance or even back then in a face-to-face hybrid kind of model. And I love the promise of online learning, but I found the tools and the pedagogy to really not be creating the kinds of engagement or community that I was looking for. And so I went back to teaching and taught political science for over a decade. And in my own courses, stayed away from the tools that were offered through the LMS, and tried other wacky things that came with their own set of problems. And now I work to help you, our clients and instructors, with our best practices and pedagogical support. So let's go. Yeah.
We wanted to start out by making sure that everybody had a chance to, find some of the resources and support that they would need if they're looking for things or having any kinds of issues. So wanted to just bring those up. I would recommend possibly just taking a screenshot of this. Bob, I don't know if you have the presentation open to be able to copy those out, but we can try to get those links in the chat as well. If you need a course consultation, you can definitely contact Bob at yellowdig.com, Bob, and he'll happily help you out. We also have an instructor certification course. If you haven't taken it yet, we recommend that for people that are using the platform, especially people starting out fresh. It's a great way to introduce new faculty to it. And we think it only takes about an hour. We think it's well worth that hour. It'll return. We'll return that time in time saved and really the building some of the outcomes. Our knowledge base is help.yellowdig.co. You'll be able to find a lot of your support answers there. But if you can't, you can contact us at support@yellowdig.com. We are running some monthly office hours if you have questions or would like to hear other people's questions and answers. So we've been doing those sessions once a month. So check those out. And then we do have a support community for Yellowdig instructors to be able to talk to one another and share good teaching tips and things that they're finding that work. So if you haven't been in that, please do check it out.
All right. And really, don't be shy. We're here to help you. We want you to succeed in using Yellowdig. And we love working with you. So please reach out if we can be of assistance. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, so Yellowdig, from the early days was really focused around the idea of trying to build a complete educational experience. And a lot of what we noticed and the CEO noticed in his own education was that oftentimes social presence was really missing from his courses. And we saw as a lot more education was going online, including even before the pandemic, but especially now, a lot of courses had almost no social presence element to them. Or on-ground courses, people were assuming that the social fabric of the campus was providing most of the social presence. So we've definitely seen that in a lot of cases that social presence element is missing, and that's where students are able to really project themselves socially and emotionally into this space, and it's a really important part of learning, of feeling connected to the material, of getting excited about things that are going on, and talking to other people about those things, including the instructor. So it's a really super important part of the course, and we think that's missing in a lot of cases. And so one of the things I think all of you are here for is to sort of think about how we can design that element into our courses and make sure that students are really able to take full advantage of that. And Yellowdig sort of saw the standard model of a social assignment for a course being an assignment where students would come in at the beginning of the week and respond to an instructor's prompt about what to talk about, and then talk a little bit about whatever those responses were. And I think that we see a number of problems with this paradigm itself. Probably the most important is that prompts are really creating a focus on the instructor as the audience. You get a cold start at the beginning of every week, so there's nothing for those first students to talk about when they actually come in. So they learn to just wait until closer to the deadline when there might be other students there to respond to. And then the problem with everybody waiting is it creates more procrastinators, but actually procrastinators in this kind of framework are not actually having a social experience. So they're responding to the instructor, they're responding to other students, but nobody is there to respond to them because the next week we go on to the next thing. So I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I just add that, this design really encourages procrastination because of the deadline and the idea that this is an assignment with a due date, and that students organize their lives in that way and only want to come in the community, or only feel like they have the ability to come in the community when they're submitting that assignment. And community is actually the wrong word. They come into the discussion board to add their assignment when their lives, when they have to do their other assignments first. This one is due on Sunday, I'll do it on Sunday afternoon. And that leads to this procrastination by design. Let's move on. All right. So this is the Yellowdig paradigm, and some of you have obviously been in Yellowdig before, are familiar with this to some degree. The idea that these are instructor modeled communities rather than instructor led communities. You can see at the beginning of each of these sort of conversations represented by dots and dashes, but it's not always the instructor who's at the beginning here. The students have the agency, the ability to share what's relevant to them, to bring in what's important, to share their own personal life experiences, to ask questions and answer each other's questions, and to have conversations ebb and flow as things are going on in the real world around them related to the course materials.
Yep, and I think in our community model, we really suggest instructors think of themselves as the model citizen, really excited about the topic, hopefully, and respond to students, extend conversations with them, spend a little bit of time commenting. We don't think you have to spend a ton of time in these communities, but it definitely helps if you show that you're there and you care. And that's kind of how we talk about it internally or whatever. But, a few comments on students can really encourage them to try to get your attention in future weeks and create really interesting, thoughtful posts, throughout the course. If they see that you're getting accolades and you're recognizing good content, that can really help make the entire experience better for everyone.
Yeah, and especially at the outset, I think it's fair to say that if you model those behaviors that you want to see, especially at the outset of the course, and really set expectations for what the purpose of the community is, what your role as the instructor is going to be, and also what your expectations for students and the types of conversations they have, you're really going to have an easier time as you go on.
All right, so now we're getting into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. This is going to be our last slide, I think, before we go into a demo. We can walk through some of the new things and some of the features that we think are super important. But just as a sort of framework, Yellowdig was designed as a single community with a sort of single semester long assignment. And you can certainly, have some focused conversations throughout the semester and whatever. But in terms of the grade passback to the learning management system, you really need to make one assignment link. And then if you want to have sort of reminders to Yellowdig throughout your course, we would typically recommend that you hyperlink back to the assignment, the single assignment link. Reason being is that students do have to click that assignment link in order to get their grade passback set up. And you really will only be able to have one grade column for Yellowdig in your course. One of the other things that we see just as a sort of reminder is that if students ever have access issues, a lot of times they're actually related to something about their specific tech or their specific settings. So we usually just encourage students to reach out directly to us if they're having any kind of access problem, and we would invite you to do that, because a lot of times it actually shortens our time to being able to solve their problem if we can just talk to them directly and know exactly what they're experiencing. And then if you're planning to use a learning management system, we would typically not recommend inviting students. For one, in order to use the grading, students have to click the graded assignment link in their course. But the other thing is that if you use an email that doesn't match what's in the learning management system, you can create duplicate accounts. And the invite links will allow students to create an account with their own email of their choosing. So that's also another way that those can get created. A lot of those invite functions, when you're thinking about a class that's integrated in a learning management system, those were intended to sort of invite in guest speakers or other people that wouldn't necessarily be using the grading functionality. So that's just some food for thought there. Anything to add to any of that, Bob?
No, I think we're pretty good. We can when we're in the platform, we can show that where those invite sections are, so people know that, to avoid them, I guess it would be the best way to put it, unless you're in one of those other use cases. I want to mention to everybody that, hey, you can ask questions. If you'll notice at the bottom right of your Zoom window, there's a Q&A button or box or whatever you want to call it, and you can feel free to submit questions in there and we will get to them. And I think at the moment, we just want to be sure that anyone here who's brand new to Yellowdig knows what you're looking at here. So what you see here is a Yellowdig community, a demo community for a Business 101 class. And it's a single scrolling feed that'll be very familiar to anyone who's ever used any kind of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Pinterest. No, I don't know about Pinterest. And it's rich in graphical detail. You can bring in web links, you can add video, PDF files, any kind of images. And again, it'll be something that your students are familiar with as well, as far as knowing how to comment and post. But there are a couple of things that make Yellowdig very unique, and we often get questions about the point system and how to explain it to students. So why don't we start with that? And hopefully this is a refresher for most of you, but let's talk about the point system. As Brian, I think, mentioned earlier, Yellowdig is a single assignment for the entire semester, and students need to earn those points over the course of the semester to get to their point total to pass back as a grade that you'll decide how much that is worth for your own particular course in your learning management system. But the important thing probably to relay to students is how the point system works. And there are two types of points in Yellowdig that students need to understand, and that you as an instructor need to understand. The first type is the participation points, the points that students get for typing posts that meet in commenting, meeting the minimum word criteria. So if Brian were to create a post and he met the minimum word criteria, he would get a certain number of points, in this case 250. And if I saw his post and I commented and I met the minimum word criteria, I would also get some points. But that's not really where the magic occurs. But congratulations to me and Brian for both getting points. Anyway, the next piece of the puzzle are the social points. This just changes things a lot. So these social points, let's go through the scenario. Brian posted, he got points. I commented, I got points. But because of these social points, Brian also got awarded some additional points. All right. And hopefully this tells Brian, you know what, if I go in earlier in my earning period, which is sort of a delineation between weeks in Yellowdig to get students back in, not a deadline, but a way to get students back into the platform, more people will be able to see his post if he goes in earlier, and therefore hopefully he'll get more comments or reactions from other users, making it easier for him to get his point total. So that's part one. Part two is this. This time I post and Brian sees my post, Brianna and the participants, and Charmaine and Heather and Jennifer and Carl and Ken, and I can't see the rest of the list, but everyone sees my post, and yet you scroll on by and I feel terrible. But I went in early because I knew that if I went in early, I could get some points. Brian, why didn't anyone comment on or react to my post?
Probably because it was not very interesting, Bob, or didn't really make me think and want to engage with it.
Yeah, it's a problem for me. But the point is that hopefully I will learn, not only do I need to go in earlier in order to make it easier to get my points, but I have to create something that's on topic or interesting or well written, that's in order to get my students to engage with me, to get my peers to engage with me, I should say. And the system really works to do that. Two other things of note with regard to the points that I think is worth understanding and sharing with your students. First of all, reactions. Students or instructors often think reactions are superfluous, and they don't really necessarily always want to engage those social points for reactions. But Brian, what do those reactions mean?
It really is associated with students actually reading the content and liking it, right? So students, especially because they know they're giving points to other students when they react to posts, won't react to posts that they think are really, not good or not interesting. And what probably would be surprising to people is two things about reactions. First of all, the students that give out the most reactions actually end up having the best outcomes in their courses. And it's because they're reading more of the content, they're consuming more of the content, and they're interacting with other students. They're actually talking with them. So it's most predictive of learning. But we also know that it's one of the highest predictors of overall community health. So communities where students are reacting more also are reading more posts. They're commenting more voluntarily. They're posting beyond the minimum word counts. So reactions are actually associated with at least the student interpretation that the whole community is a better, more interesting place to be. So it's one of the highest predictors of community health, overall community health.
And I want to also just add to that and say, I mean, everything Brian says is absolutely true. Students don't get points for giving reactions. They only get points for getting them. So it's really a behavior that you want to encourage. The second piece that I want to just go back to is the commenting points. As you'll notice there, commenting is very highly valued. We generally say that comments should be valued worth at least as much per word as posts. So in this scenario, commenting is a minimum of 20 words or less, those points you can see will really add up. This empowers students who don't feel comfortable posting or are just more having trouble coming up with something to post to help drive conversations and earn their points through commenting alone. What we're going for here is not just posting. Posting is less important. It's important to have conversations. It's great to have them started, but we need to have them continued. And those points for commenting help us get there. I think since we're going along this line, we'll talk next about topics and then accolades and then some strategies for setting expectations for all of that. All right. So the next thing that we want to talk about is a foundation in Yellowdig to really keep your conversations course relevant and to be able to have them ebb and flow as the semester goes on. Are topics and topics. If you're a longtime user of Yellowdig, we've sort of evolved a little bit on topics in a number of ways. First of all, by default now, when you create a new community, topics will be required. In other words, a student or you, frankly, can't complete the posting activity unless you add a topic to that post. And these topics are defined by the instructor. Only an instructor, community owner, facilitator can create those topics. And we would encourage you to have them align with your top level syllabus subject matter, those main conversations. Another way of looking at it is have them reflect the main conversations that you want students to have. And don't name them week 1 or module 7 or anything like that, because that's going to make it harder for students to recall what that particular item is. Create them in a way that creates those conversations. Whatever's interesting in your course that you want to have those discussions about, that's what those topics should be named. I wouldn't name a. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, the other thing is that students can attach multiple topics to a post. And part of what we want to do in these conversations is really blend topics together and make sure students are integrating across the weeks of the class, right? So if you call it week 1 and have students use that as a topic, then obviously they're only thinking about that one topic and they aren't thinking about how it actually creates a thread that goes through your entire course. These individual weekly topics are never divorced from each other in a class, right? You want students to be combining ideas and you want them to be able to filter by either of the topics that it's actually relevant to, or maybe there's 3, right? But that idea of blending them together can be really important.
And before we leave this screen, we've one update in the platform is that topics are now rearrangeable. And if you're looking for strategies around that, one great idea is to put them in alphabetical order so they're easy to find. And if in a particular part of the course you wanted to highlight one particular topic, you could drag that to the top, making it easier for students to find. And remember, that's going to allow, these topics are going to allow these topics to these concepts to reemerge when something's happening in the real world related to them. So students can easily come back to these topics. The topics do several things. Brian, let's go back to the community.
I just wanted to quickly show one thing. You can enable and disable topics. So one thing people will ask us, you can add topics at any point in the course. It doesn't have to be set up beforehand. right? So if you did want to like add new topics, or students seem to be really interested in something, you want to create a topic for that, you can absolutely do that. We typically don't recommend deleting the topics because it deletes the data, but you can disable them so that they just won't show up. So you could also set up your topics beforehand and just disable the ones you wouldn't want to show up. But there's some definite functionality there that you could consider using.
All right. So now you know the structure of topics. The reason they're so important is because they really do keep your students talking about the important things in your course. And that's where students would be able to add the topics. And by the way, if they tried to post without a topic, that screen would come up and they would have to choose a topic before they could complete that posting. But the topics are, if you don't already know, they're filters. Clicking on one of those topic tags at the top of that post will create a view of the feed to show only those posts that are under posts and comments that are under that topic, making it easier to have those conversations reemerge, make it easier to find those conversations that you're interested in that particular time. And also hopefully providing a little less redundancy in posting too, because students can easily see that something under that topic has already been posted that they may be looking at. The next thing that those topics do is it makes students think about what they're bringing into the community. If topics are required and they have to add a topic, they really have to go a little bit deeper and figure out, where does this belong in the course, right? Without it, they could just say, you know, I saw something in the news related to the course, here it is, without much thought. But if they have to add the topic, they have to go a little bit deeper and figure out where it belongs. And the third thing is for you as the instructor, and that's the ability to follow and see how students are engaging on those topics and where they're spending their time. As Brian's pointing out, in community health area under data, which you have and students don't have, you can click on topics, and then you can see on a global basis which topics students are spending the most time on and which topics they're spending the least time on. And you may say to yourself, you know what, maybe I should surface this topic because they haven't been spending a little more time on, enough time on it. Or maybe they're pretty good on this one, I can move on. The next thing is, if you scroll down, and I think this is an important thing that a lot of people may not realize, you scroll down, you can see how each individual student is engaging on those topics, and find out who might need a little more support, and maybe who your experts are on some of these topics, who have personal experiences related to those things. All right, let's now talk about accolades. And again, feel free to throw any questions you have into the Q&A. Brian, what are accolades?
Yeah, accolades are a visual way to recognize interesting or good content in whatever way you want. And in this demo community, we have a whole bunch that we set up, but you can essentially name them whatever you want, make them look however you want, and then associate a certain number of points with them. And we think about points in general, but especially accolades. First of all, as an easy way for you to recognize good content and recognize students that are doing the right things. But we think about the point system in general as a great way to, sort of change future behavior, right? So if you are using an early bird accolade and you're giving a few bonus points to students that are coming in and getting good conversations started, other students are going to try to get those accolades because it helps them get to their point total faster, right? So this gives you an opportunity to give a visual recognition to that content. Students will know that they get points for those kinds of things, and other students will try to change their behavior in ways that will allow them to get those accolades.
Yeah, so those accolades are a way for you to be present in the community without suddenly derailing the conversation that students are having. Because when you go in there and you comment, and that doesn't mean you should never comment, but when you go in and comment, students are going to pay a little extra attention to being you rather than just being another student commenting, and the conversation can get sort of turned towards you. By the way, speaking of commenting, when you do decide to comment, don't just say great post. What should you say, Brian?
Yeah, I always recommend asking a question to extend the conversation, ending your comment with a question, or sharing a resource that contributes something new to the argument the student was making, or to what the student was saying. Basically, try to be a good conversational partner rather than just saying great post. And some of that recommendation is just about trying to get students and other students to come and continue that talk, continue that thread of that conversation. But that really falls in line with our recommendation of sort of think of yourself as the ideal community citizen. You wouldn't want your other students to come in and just say great post and leave. So from a modeling perspective, you should sort of show those students what you would like them to do, and that would be build a stronger back and forth conversation around things that are being posted.
So I see Ken has a question, and Ken, we're going to absolutely answer your question. It's a really good question. I want to, before we do that though, I want to just not leave this idea of starting your Yellowdig community. And I think this even applies a little bit to your question, Ken, and we'll surface that in just a minute. But the idea of setting expectations for students, so at the outset, and your role in modeling the kind of conversations that you want to see in order to get students to go. It's really important that students understand that there's value in the community beyond the idea that they're just there to earn points, that they know that you'll be present in the community as well. And so it's important that you explicitly communicate this to them. And one way to do that is in Yellowdig, use the record video function if you're comfortable with that. And if you can click on that, Brian, you're not going
to use my other webcam because
oh, exciting. Look, he's under the table. Anyway, so if it were me, I would say something like, welcome to our Yellowdig community. And this would be at the very outset of the term. Welcome to our Yellowdig community. The purpose of this community is for us to have course relevant conversations and learn from each other. My role in this community is to be another citizen of it. I'm not going to post or comment all the time. I will award occasional accolades. I hope to share some of my passion for the subject matter in my posts and comments, but effectively, I'm going to behave the way you are and try to engage in rich, meaningful conversations related to what's important in our topic. You must earn your points, but I'd like you to think about this community as a place where you can ask and answer each other's questions, where you can share your personal experiences related to the various topics, and where you can bring in real life examples of what's going on related to what we're doing in class. And of course, we want to have adult conversations here and speak to people respectfully, that's the word. And by the way, with the record video function, you do have 90 seconds there to do that. You can also upload your own videos up to 512 megabytes. And when you're using the record video function, there is a pause button that will help you organize your thoughts, or at least helps me organize my thoughts. So you're not going to just get stuck in the middle and have to redo it a million times. So anyway, and then from beyond that, at the outset, you create that post, maybe do a separate video post or a written post where you do a little introduction of yourself, and again, share some of that passion you have for the subject matter and encourage students to do something similar to get people going. But let's get to Ken's question. Shall I read it? I'll read it. I'm interested in your recommendations around prompts for discussions. In teaching a technical course, I'm wondering how to stimulate discussion without directing. Excellent question.
Yeah, so we have a few different recommendations around that. One of the reasons that we sort of suggest people shy away from prompts is not because we think it's bad to occasionally direct students' attention to a specific thing or to encourage a specific conversation, but because we don't want students to have the expectation that they come just before the deadline for that conversation to end, and that the only time that there's going to be action in the community is right before that conversation ends and the next one starts, right? So it's sort of the deadline and that required end and start to a new one that is kind of the most disruptive of good student conversation, because if everybody comes in a short window of time, uh, they don't really actually talk back and forth. They just kind of all post at each other and then leave. So one of the ways that we recommend having a little bit more of a directed discussion is what we're calling sort of conversation themes, right? But it's okay to suggest that students discuss a specific thing. A lot of times we would suggest allowing them the freedom to still bring in outside articles or bring their own topics if they see something particularly interesting, particularly relevant, and to use those those suggestions and themes as a way to just give students an idea of something to talk about. Maybe if they can't find anything interesting, or they just are having a little trouble getting started or something like that, kind of use it as a suggestion, and you'll see that students will start talking about those themes a lot, and they will still bring in other highly relevant content. So that's one way I would think about it. And Ken, specifically for technical courses, we've seen a lot of people allow Q&A to exist right alongside of the sort of, share outside posts from things that are happening in the news, share things that are highly relevant to the course that you may have run into in your real life. And so maybe one really good example that I thought was cool was a chemistry class. And it was actually the single most active community per student was a chemistry class. And they were allowing, regular question and answer kinds of things. If a student had a question, they could bring it there, get an answer from other students. The instructor would jump in if they needed to. But if they didn't have questions, they could bring in kind of whatever else they thought was interesting. And a student went to the dining commons and was really interested in the difference between apple juice and orange juice and why does it taste different and smell different. And they actually started doing some research that they shared on Yellowdig about what the differences were in the compounds in those two juices. And that's the kind of thing where if you had prompted that student, they would have never done that research. And the other students thought the conversation was really interesting and like ran with it, right? But you might not have thought of that specific thing to ask them about. And at the same time, if you only sort of allowed Q&A in your community or whatever, students might not have thought that they would be able to just kind of post something.
So two things. In the chat, I've posted a couple of articles on the STEM use case and the Q&A forum, one from an instructor perspective, Dr. Vicky Hart at University of Vermont, who created a Q&A forum there, and then another one more general related to some point settings and other things regarding STEM use cases. And, to Brian's point, there's so much going on in the world that, especially in STEM courses, I think can bring relevance to what they're doing. I mean, if you're talking about something in the abstract and something's happening in the world and the student can then bring that in, or you bring that into the Yellowdig community, it provides that connection, that relevance between the practical learning that you're doing, or the abstract learning that you're doing, and the practical reality that's going on in the world, and can help with that.
At a really high level, I think what students really want out of their communities is the ability to have a little bit of freedom and explore ideas that they think are important, or ask questions that they think are important that they're having, and to be able to have a place where other people can help them, including the instructor. And so we've seen as a pattern that students do like a lot of flexibility, which is why, we'll often recommend, if you're trying to prompt a specific discussion, try and present it as an option to talk about, and students definitely will talk about it, but still give them some freedom. But with that freedom, the other thing we see is that students still do like a lot of feedback, right? So students want to know they're on the right track. They want to know if something they're saying or another student is saying is on the right track. And so commenting a little bit throughout these conversations, putting up those accolades, you don't have to do it a lot, but doing some of those things really helps students know that, okay, you're paying attention to what's going on here and you're helping them know that those things are sort of the right thing.
Brian, let's talk about the verified response accolade since you sort of brought that up. We didn't mention it before.
Yeah, we didn't mention it before. I have to find it. There it is.
So the verified response accolade is sort of a unique use case. It's if you explicitly empower your students to ask and answer each other's questions in Yellowdig, hopefully that'll lessen your workload a little bit. You won't get a million emails all about the same question. If you say, put all your questions in Yellowdig, right? And then tell students, what, try to answer each other's questions too. Hopefully they'll do the heavy lifting on things that are in the syllabus, especially, and stuff like that. But when students try to answer each other's questions on course content or that type of questions, it's a really important learning experience, not only for the person asking the question who feels empowered and able to ask a question, but also for the student answering. Because to answer a question, first of all, you have to understand the question. Second, you have to think you know the answer. And then third, and probably most importantly, you have to synthesize that knowledge and figure out a way to communicate it effectively to your peers. So that's really important as a learning experience for the student who's answering the question. And if you can take your hands off the wheel and let students answer those questions that they're posing for a couple of days or something like that, they'll all have that, the number of them will have that learning experience. The problem is, as sort of Brian mentioned, is that students want to know that which is the right answer. If 15 people answer the same question, that's great. They've all had this experience, but they still want to know which one does Professor Ken say is the right one. And instead of having to type an answer, you can just go in and award that particular verified response accolade for that best answer. And the accolades are filters, just like the topic tag, so they can easily find all of those verified response tagged comments or posts.
Yeah, so you can click on the accolades or you can filter by them here as well. So, and just since we're already here, these filters can be added on top of one another if you don't know that. So I could look for things that have a specific accolade and a specific topic, right? So I could look for verified responses just on marketing posts if I'm trying to study specifically for a test that I know is going to have marketing information on it or something like that.
So we're at 12:45, and a couple things that I think we still should cover in order are how to use Yellowdig data as an instructor. And also want to point out some of the new features going on. So we already showed you under data and community health, you can see how topics are going. But Brian, why don't you walk through a little bit more about what's in there and how this can be used?
Yeah, so just at a high level, this will show you sort of, how much each student is producing in your community in terms of reactions, comments, posts. We do surface this thing here called the conversation ratio, which is the number of comments per post. If you think about a standard sort of discussion model, it would be, post once and comment on 2 other posts. That would yield a conversation ratio of about 2. Our research has indicated that students, are participating the most and posting sort of and commenting voluntarily the most in communities that have a conversation ratio closer to 8. Meaning that there's 8 comments with some good back and forth conversation around each post that's being created. And so, definitely pay attention to that conversation ratio and try to get that certainly a little bit higher than the traditional 2, because it is that conversation that drives most of the learning benefits, most of the social benefits of having these communities.
All right, the health check. What you're going to see here at the top, and we're going to scroll right past that, is some green check marks to verify that you're in line with what we call our passive best practices. But below that, probably more importantly, on an ongoing basis, is a series of scores of how your community is doing on several different metrics related to all other Yellowdig communities, or depending on your institution, you may be able to see how your community is compared to those other the other courses at your institution. And those 3 scores are the sharing score, the listening score, and the interacting score. And when you click on those numbers at the top, the metrics below them will change to reflect that particular what's being measured as a whole in those particular spots. There's little question marks at the bottom of those if you have any questions about what exactly is being measured there. But we like to focus especially on the listening and the interacting scores. The sharing scores is posting and posting related behaviors, which are not as indicative of conversations and community, but the listening score shows reading and how many posts are viewed and things like that. And the interacting score shows the connections between students and reactions and things like that that really can give you some insights into what's happening in your community. And again, with the topics, you can actually, going back up to the top there again, Brian. I just want to stress again that those topics can really help guide what you're doing in your class, and you can use those to make adjustments and to surface things that maybe students haven't spent enough time on.
One thing I want to quickly mention about the health check, just quickly, what we've seen in our data is that the communities that have the highest overall health score are typically leading in the listening score. And I always say you can't have a good conversation with somebody who's not listening to you. And so it really makes sense that what we need more than anything is for students to actually be willing to come back to these communities, read the things that are being shared, think about them, and interact with other students. And the other thing I always say is you can learn a lot just by lurking in a community, right? And I make the joke that my mother-in-law knows a ton about my life from seeing me on Facebook, but I have never seen her make a post or comment on Facebook yet. So just some food for thought in terms of learning and what is sort of driving the most learning.
So I just wanted to quickly go over to the reports, because I think it's important for you as instructors to know that you can see the students' progress through the point report specifically, where you'll be able to see all of your students and how far they are on pace as a whole. And also, if you click on that log, as Brian's pointing out, you'll be able to see each and every individual action that they take in Yellowdig and whether or not there are points awarded and how many points. And so if a student is asking anything about that, you'll have the answer, and there's not going to be any ambiguity about the points as far as that goes. And in the network graph, especially if your course is, say, under 50 students, this is going to be a place where you can graphically see how your students are interacting and find those outlying students who may be having some sort of issues, like that jerk. That's me, by the way, someone who hasn't really been interacting. We do have a story of a professor who, during the pandemic, went in and saw that there was one outlier student in her course. And she reached out to that student, and it turned out he had been feeling extremely isolated. He hadn't had anyone to talk to in throughout the pandemic, and was very depressed and hadn't been participating. This brought him into the community, and I certainly can't say that it saved his life or anything like that, but it made him feel heard. And this graph really helped out as far as that goes.
Yeah, and there is also a table of data that will allow you to sort by different variables. For larger classes, just because this gets a little bit busy, that table can be really helpful as well.
All right, let's go back to the community. We were talking about that point report and how it can help you figure out where students are. I would encourage you to have students for their own, when they're looking for how they're doing, to go to the Yellowdig point modal on the right side of the screen, where they can see exactly how they are and what their progress is, and they can see all those things and the point awards specifically as we sort of described them there.
Yeah. One thing that I like to point out to a lot of people, because I think it helps really understand how points are earned, is basically, Yellowdig is a single semester long assignment. So there's an end goal set, and the weeks are just kind of waypoints along the way, where students, as long as they're kind of on pace to that total, they'll have a grade of 100%, or have more points than they need to have that. this person has been slacking, so their line is still way down here. But if students are maintaining a pace that is above this sort of set of blue lines, they're definitely on track. And that's a good way for them to think about it as well, just in terms of sort of keeping up a regular participation throughout the course in their community.
Scroll down, please. I just want them to see that students also have that same point log that you have that shows what their progress is. In this case, we're looking at
a blank, blank person that didn't do anything.
Yeah. Another thing that I think we want to surface at this point, since we're really running low on time, is reminders. I wanted to remind you about reminders, Brian. Are you reminded? Can you tell people about reminders?
So reminders are a feature we released semi-recently. So if you're copying courses from previous runs, definitely go in and check out whether this is set up for you. And I would strongly suggest enabling it. Essentially, you can set a reminder to go out every certain number of days with a repeat. By default, we set it so that it sends it out after 5 days and then every 7 days after that for a total of 4 times. So students won't continue to get spammed if they're not coming back in or whatever. And this first notification, we're in the process of sort of building out a full set of these, but the first notification just basically says, hey, you haven't been to the community in a while. Here's a post that you might find interesting, and that post will be one of the most interacted with posts that they haven't looked at yet. So then they can easily just jump back into the community and get going again. And we're seeing that that's helping definitely re-engage students that might otherwise be falling off. At the bottom for you, you'll be able to see how long it's been since the student last logged an activity in our system. You'll see when the next notification is going out. And because students can turn these off, you can see if they've opted out of the notification. So maybe if they did opt out, you see they're staying at the top of this list. Maybe you want to reach out to them some other specific direct way, but it gives you some information about what's going on. And then at the bottom, you'll see, when the last notifications were sent.
Brian, on the left, I wanted to point out some things about the profile, but is the help widget officially live?
Yes, it must be. They released it this morning. Yeah. So we did add a link to our help center directly in as a help button, and we have a link to contact us if people can't find what they need in the knowledge base right there. A quick search of our knowledge base as well. So we've added that, and we added some branding here as well. So that's what you're seeing here. That will be your university's logo if it's set in the network settings, and this will be the organization settings for admins and things like that.
You may not see that if you're not an admin.
Yeah, you may not see it.
All right. And then finally down there, a lot of people aren't really aware of that avatar there. This avatar allows you to change your profile settings, and specifically, oftentimes what you might see displayed in your own post is just your email address that you use to join Yellowdig. If you go into that account settings, you can change it to Professor Brian, Verdine or what have you there, and just make it a little more personal. Obviously, you can upload a picture as well, just to sort of, again, model the behavior that you want students to do. What else should we share? We've got a few minutes left, and certainly we're open to more questions. Anything else new that we've haven't touched on? The getting started flow?
Yeah, I can go back to that. We did add recently a getting started flow for every instructor. When you create a new community, it'll show up. And that getting started flow basically will allow you to kind of quick set up your community. So the couple of things that you have to set are the start and end date if you're going to use the point system. And we wanted to encourage people to think about their topics and whether they should add or change any of them. But now you can just easily, quickly set your first and last day to earn points. If you want to disable points entirely, you can do that.
Don't do that.
We would recommend not doing that. We think they're important, but you can. There's a quick and easy way to set up your topics. And this all works with the course copying. So if you're copying a course, it will have the topics set up there already. Definitely take a look and see if you want to edit them. And then last, we just have a couple of really quick videos to kind of communicate some of the things we've been talking about here today. But for those people that are supporting faculty or newbies, hopefully this really will help them get started quickly with a good kickoff. And we also have a link to our instructor certification course there. If you haven't taken it, definitely encourage that.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left. I want to remind people that one of the links that we shared in the chat was for the monthly office hour session. So if you have continuing questions, you can join one of those office hour sessions, or all of them if you want. And Sue has a question I'm not sure I completely understand.
Yeah, I think I do. So tell me if this is wrong, Sue, I guess. The Yellowdig is designed to be adaptive to screen size. So the screen that you're seeing now is designed for our largest screen size. And what will happen on smaller screens is that left-hand menu collapses in, and it's available here if you need to deploy it. That will show you your community settings. So I imagine that you might be on a smaller screen, or if Yellowdig is opened in an iframe in your LMS, a lot of times you'll get a restricted screen. That's probably where that that community menu is hiding on you there. And just to give an idea, since I'm messing around with screen sizes, Yellowdig will open like this on a tablet and sort of scrunches down even smaller for mobile. So it does work pretty well on a mobile device, just opening it in the browser, and people can log into Yellowdig as long as they've set a password without going through their learning management system. The only thing that I guess you should know about that is they still are going to need to go through the learning management system at least once to be added to the community, assuming you're integrated with that, to be added to the community and to get their grades configured. But once they do that one time, if they participate in Yellowdig from any platform, it should work pretty well.
You're looking at that, yeah.
And I see your other questions too. We certainly see that browsers will sometimes change things, and we have to sort of chase down some compatibility things. But we really don't have a strong recommendation for any specific browser. And when we hear about any problems that people might be having with specific browsers, we are bug hunting those. So
I wouldn't stay away from Netscape.
yeah, Netscape. Yeah. Exactly. Internet Explorer is also not a really great one at this point either. But yeah, other than that, most of them should work pretty equally well.
Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Give us feedback on these sessions. We'd like to know if these are working for you. And always please feel free to reach out if we can be of any kind of assistance.